Okay, welcome to the last webinar of the 2024 part of our webinar series. Today we'll be talking about the technical side of annotations. This is the last one for this year, but don't worry, we'll be picking up again in January, I believe on the topic of sources, which is a pretty fun topic, so stay tuned for that. For those who haven't met me, which is none of the people here today, but perhaps if we've got people watching YouTube later. Hi, I'm Navarra. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the project manager for LEMDO. I've been working with the project for a little over 3 years. And fun fact about me, I'm in the process of knitting a pair of mitts. They're nice, they're orange, they'll hopefully be cozy for wintertime. But with that said, I do tend to be a bit of a fidgeter. And if that's also you, please feel free to be moving about, doodling, taking notes, whatever you need to do to make this work well for you. Before we get too deep into this, I would like to acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen, Songhees, and Esquimalt peoples on whose territory the university stands, and the Lekwungen and Wasanich peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. Okay, so today we're going to go through a few things. If you were at the last webinar on the editorial side of annotations, some parts of this will be familiar. This is just kind of the second half to round out that learning. We're going to take a look at the basic encoding model of annotation files. We're going to talk about how to indicate your annotation types. Last webinar, Janelle talked a bit about the 7 different types of annotations that we have. I'll show you how to actually, say that each annotation is one of those. We're going to have a bit of a reminder about how to add anchors to your modernized text so that you can link between it and your annotation file. And then finally, you're going to know how to indicate when specific annotations are for publication only online or only in the print edition of your text. So the encoding model, wild world of the annotation file. It's not that wild once you get into it, but at first it can seem a little bit odd, I find. This is it. Please excuse my weird color scheme. I've changed the color of my oxygen. I can see it better. I don't know if other people can, but hopefully it's reasonable enough. So usually when I show a basic encoding model, I tend to focus on the text part of the file. But with annotations, I also wanted to show the TEI header. So the reason for that is, although sure, the text is where your actual annotations go, they're the part that people, see when they visit our website or see when they read a print edition. The TEI header is really important for our annotations. So when we look at the file, very much pared down, we have a TEI element, as we have for all of our TEI files, that has a child TEI header and a child text. Our TEI header has a few things. It's got the standard file desk, which contains, of course, a title statement that says what the name of your text is, who wrote the annotations, things like that. An edition statement to say which anthology you're being released with, publication statement to give copyright. Annotations are a little bit unique, along with collations, in that they have a note statement that must have a related item. This is where we link to that modernized text. And this says, hey, processor, we're writing an annotation. We need to be linking to a modernized text. This is the one to be linking to. Please let me put annotation markers in there. The format is it's a self-closing element. It's a related item. It has a target attribute, doc, colon, and then your modernized text as the value. And we'll look at this a little bit closer. We also have a profile desk. Again, all of your text will have this. And the important thing in here is it does have a cat ref that says this is a annotation. And it says that right at the end here. When you create your file for your annotation, assuming you create it yourself, you can use our annotation template and that gets automatically added in there. You don't need to touch it, you don't need to worry about it, but it's good to know that it's there. Then we've got our encoding desk that says you did this according to what LEMDO wants you to do. A revision desk that explains what status your file is currently in, and that has children change elements that you add when you do something significant to your file. Then we're out of our TEI header and we're down to the text. This is kind of the exciting part. We've got, of course, a child body. All of our files need that. And then you're going to have a series of divs. Just one div. One div, series of notes. Your div is everything in your body and its type of annotations. Then you've got children div, or children notes of the div. Sorry, early morning for me. So we've got our note, type equals annotation, a few extra attributes, and then the notes have child notes. So every time you see a note type equals annotation, that's kind of your clump of notes on one string of text. And then inside of that, you say what that string of text is and what your actual annotation is. So if we look at those each a little bit more, in depth, we've got first our related item. Again, it's going to be inside your TEI header, which will have a child file desk, which will have a child note statement, and then our related item. This is linking your entire file to the text that you're annotating, which is typically going to be your modernized text. Our processing needs this to associate those two files. Then we've got that category reference or that cat ref. And this, again, is just telling our processing, hey, this is an annotation file. Please treat it as an annotation file. These are really important to have and to have correct. But again, if you're using one of our templates, which I highly recommend doing it that way, it gets half the work done for you as far as setting up your file. You don't need to touch this. Then once we're in the body of our text, we've got that division with type equals annotations. And so everything inside of this, it's going to be annotations. It's good information for the processor to have. Now, this might be getting a little repetitive. We're saying lots of things are going to be annotations. That's okay. We rely on these at each step to kind of get your text into the beautiful HTML that we want it to be. So where we have note with a type equals annotation, this says, this is all of the, or these are all of the notes that I want to make about this specific string of text. It wraps around all of those notes, so it can have multiple children. That's no problem. And it connects the label for your annotation, which is always going to be the string of text that you're annotating, to the notes that you write. And it also is going to link to the file that you're annotating once again, but to the specific string of text using these two attributes. So we've got target and target end. And these are our mechanisms for linking to the text that you're annotating. Target links to the anchor at the start of the string that you're annotating, and target end links to the anchor at the end of the string that you're annotating. One of the things that I will mention quickly here is that when you're writing your annotations, you don't need to worry about, oh no, am I adding too many anchors? Should I just be reusing anchors for all of these things? And the answer is, yeah, you can reuse anchors as long as they're exactly on what you want to be annotating. So don't worry about having lots of anchors in there. That's fine. They don't really impact or cause problems if you have lots of them. Preferably you're linking to all of them eventually, but it's fine to have, anchors going into the thousands, not a problem. if you've got a collation on the exact same string of text, you can reuse those anchors, or if you've got two annotations that are on slightly different strings, but they both start at the same word, you can reuse that first anchor. Oh, I will pause for a question from Janelle. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Very quiet.
I'll hold my mic up.
Perfect.
I just wanted to add that we have a diagnostic built right into Oxygen that allows you to check to see that you've actually used all of the anchors that you've added to your file. And when I'm editing, I like to check it fairly regularly for two reasons. One, if I've put anchors in with the intention of writing an annotation and I've forgotten, the sooner I check that, the better, while I'm still thinking about that passage of the text. And the second reason is that sometimes we don't intend to add an anchor, and we need to remove it so that it doesn't clutter up the text. It works the other way as well. So if you point from your annotation file to something in the text that doesn't exist, our diagnostic will flag that as well. So the most common one is you meant to point to anchor 16, but you typed 116 and 116 doesn't exist yet. So you want to correct those sorts of things as you go.
Really, thanks, Janelle. Yeah, so again, trying not to add more anchors than you're going to use. You can reuse them, but you don't need to shy away from adding anchors where you need them. Like, let's say you've got two different annotations, they're both on the same line, but they're totally different words and they're each only on one word. Add anchors around each word because that's where you want the links to be going. I find that's something that some people tend to shy away from a little bit, but please feel free. That's what we would like you to do. So we had our note with type equals annotation, which also has target and target end every time. We're also going to have other note elements, and these are going to be children of those annotation notes. So each note element inside of the annotation note contains a distinct annotation. It requires the type attribute to define what kind of note you are writing. So in practice, what that looks like, because I find that's more helpful than me just, talking at you without looking at Oxygen at all. Here's what this is going to look like. So here's a little bit of text from Henry V, the modernized version of the folio edition by James Murdoch. And James has added an annotation on your imaginary forces, which on our website looks like this. We've got this little annotation bubble. The first thing that you're going to do is in your annotation file, add an annotation note. This is what it looks like. And you'll see it's invalid. It's unhappy for a couple of reasons. The first is that it doesn't have any anchors that it's linking to using target and target end. So to start bringing it closer to valid, you're first going to go into that text that you're annotating, typically your modernized text. Highlight the string of text that you're annotating. Here it's your imaginary forces. And then add anchors. We have a keyboard shortcut to do that, to give the XML IDs for you. If you're on a Windows or a Linux machine, it's Control-Shift-A. If you're on a Mac, it's Command-Shift-A. For the vast majority of your anchors, you won't need to do anything other than put them in there. But the first time you put in anchors in your file, so anchor 1 and anchor 2, you will need to number them just to get the numbers started. So it will show up those first two with an XML ID attribute and with the value up to anc underscore. For those first two, just type the number 1 and then the number 2. And then from there on, you're golden. You type your Control-Shift-A and it will number them for you, which is really nice because if you've already done your collation, you've already added a bunch of anchors, and you might be starting from the beginning of your text again. And so you might not know exactly what anchor you're on. You don't need to keep track of that. Don't stress about it. Let the computer do it for you. Once you've added those anchors, you're going to add the target to your annotation note. So here we've got our target attribute, and then it has a link. And again, this is kind of building on some of those past webinars that we've done. If you recall our linking webinar, you might remember that this is a pathway, and the pathway starts with doc : to say, hey, we're linking to a document inside of LEMDO. Then it's going to have the file that contains the thing we're linking to. Here it's the folio modern version of Henry V, so EMDH5_FM. Then it's got a hash character to say to our processor, hey, within this modernized file, I want to link to a thing. Here's the XML ID of that thing. And the XML ID of that thing is the XML ID of the anchor that we want to link to. So here we are at our anchor. We have XML ID EMD_H5_FM_ANC_54. That's where we're beginning. So that's the XML ID right here. Target end, it's very similar. This is the end of the string. So again, we've said we want to annotate your imaginary forces. So we put our first anchor in front of your, our second anchor after forces. And so here's the target end. Same format, doc : file name, hash character, anchor XML ID. Once you've done that, you're still going to have that angry red squiggly line that says, hey, this file is invalid, you're missing something. And that something is a label. So every time that you have a note type equals annotation, it requires a child label note. And that label needs to match what your text is that you're annotating, assuming that the text you're annotating is 4 words or less. If it's more than 3 or 4 words, you can abbreviate the label using the ellipsis character. So all that you do here is, let's say you wanted to get rid of imaginary, delete imaginary, and type an ellipsis by doing Control-Shift-period, which puts in the single ellipsis period character. We don't do dot space, dot space, dot space in LEMDO. We've got the ellipsis character to look really nice on our HTML, so we use that instead. But the label note should match what you're annotating. And I'm going to, I'll stick with this for a second and then I'll show you what it looks like online. And then the final step to doing your annotations is, of course, to add your annotations. Each one, again, requires that note element. So here we've got powers of your imagination. That's a gloss for your imaginary forces. And so it has a type of gloss. Our second note that we have is forces may also suggest that the audience's imagination is being recruited into an army. See the OED, second edition, etc. And that's a commentary note. It's discussing the meaning of the text. So it's got a type equals commentary. Okay. And now I'm going to take a quick break and show you what this looks like on our website. So when we have annotations, they show up in 2 different places on our website. So if you go to your edition page, you'll see them, assuming you've added them to your edition page, at the bottom under apparatus. You can create a page, or you can add a link to your annotation specifically. It makes it really easy for you to proofread them. It makes it really easy if you've got a peer reviewer going to take a look, for them to take a look at your annotations specifically. It also makes it nice to see, you know, how robust your annotations are. but they also exist inside of your modernized text, of course. So here we are. Here's the text that we were looking at. I'm going to zoom in a bit. There we go. So here we go. We've got this text. This is a string that we wanted to be annotated. And you'll see that your imaginary forces, when I hover over it, turns blue and underlined. It also, if I hover over the actual note icon, turns a brighter blue with the underline. This underline and blue color comes from where you put your anchors. And that's why I say it's really important to add anchors to the things that you want to annotate exactly. Because you want people to see exactly what you're annotating. You don't want to add extra words or omit words that you need in there. Once we click on that, here we go, we get this little side window. This top bolded piece, that's your note type equals label. That comes from exactly what you type inside of that note type equals label. So then people again get to be reminded exactly what are you annotating. If you've put an ellipsis character in there, there will of course be an ellipsis in there. Then we have our first note, powers of your imagination, and our second note. You'll see also we have a little link here that will bring us back to this text that you've annotated. So let's say I'm a reader, I'm going through, I'm scrolling through, I've still got imaginary forces open, and oh, you know what, actually I've got more context for this now. I want to go back and read from that point again. I can just click the button and it brings me back. So that's kind of what happens in your modernized text with your annotations. What happens in your annotation text? Well, where it's just the annotations, you get your label, it's bolded, and then you get each of your notes. Here's one with an ellipsis in there, famine, fire. Here we go. Here's one we were looking at. So again, we've got our bolded label. It matches exactly what's in the text. We've got our first note. We've got our second note. We also have this little link at the bottom. It takes us back to that point in the modernized text. There it is. So if I'm going through and I'm looking at the annotations on their own and I want to get back to the modernized text, see what the context for that little string of text is, I can do it at the click of a button, which is quite handy. So that's what happens with each of those elements is label gets turned into that nice bolded text. Everything else comes after it. The anchors highlight your string blue and also give you that nice little annotation button at the end. So a quick refresh on the types of notes you might be writing. Janelle went much more into detail on this at our last webinar, but I will give a little quick refresher on what these all are. So we have, I believe it's 7 types of types, or 7 types of annotations. Our first is gloss. A gloss gives a glossary, it gives a definition. And by default, it would appear both online and in a print edition of your text. So some of our annotations we've decided, this really works best in the online environment, or it's too much information to put into the PDF. We don't want, annotations to take up half a page all the time. And so we've kind of determined for some things, online only is the way to go. But by default, gloss is going to appear both PDF and online versions. Same with commentary, which are discussion of the meaning of the text. They're kind of where you might get a little bit wordy about your interpretations. And they can sometimes be a bit long, but they also by default would appear online and in print. Textual notes that explain both your textual decisions and previous editions' textual decisions. They're often paired with a collation. They're going to appear online only. Same with pedagogical notes, which offer teaching tips and strategies. Performance notes are anthology's choice. I believe that QME is really the anthology that's using these so far. I expect that they're planning on putting them in print as well. But our performance notes describe performance choices from specific productions. Lexical notes provide etymology. They're online only. Lineation notes discuss lineation or relineation. They're also online only. But let's say you do have some of those really long commentary notes. How do you want people to access them? Well, when we've got those really long notes, they're actually not going to show up in the PDF. You're going to get an error message that says your note is too long because we don't want people to have half a page of annotations to try and flip through all over the place. So you get to say these two long ones, yeah, they're going to appear online only. But you might want them to get something in the print edition. And so you kind of get to think each of these long notes, or really each of your notes, how do you want people to access them, or what information do people need depending on how they're looking at your edition? So you can mark them as being for online only or for print only. And here's an example again from Henry V of one where we've got this long note that too long for a PDF. And so it got that error message, hey, your note's too long. Please either put it online only or revise it. And so here's how that was kind of dealt with. So the first thing is, of course, encode your annotation as usual. This one, we've got a short gloss note and then a long lexical note. That long lexical note is the one that's too long. And so the first thing to say, this is going to be for online publication only because it's too long for print, is we're going to add the subtype attribute. And then a value of online only. And this says to the processor, hey, don't bother putting this in the PDF and giving me an error message. I know it's too long. It's going only in the HTML. But maybe you do want something else to show up. Yeah, Janelle. Can't hear you again. I'm sorry.
We have a rule that lexical notes never appear in print.
Oh, well then probably we need to revise this one. I just said that, didn't I? Yeah.
Yeah, it was on the table. So, but what Navarra is
Imagine it's like
explaining would
commentary.
pertain for commentary notes.
Yeah. Commentary and also gloss and performance. Yeah. So imagine this says commentary and not lexical. Which again, Janelle, let's flag this and return to it later because presumably we want something in PDF. So if you do want something to show up in your PDF, you're like, this is important for the reader to kind of have a bit of information about, even if they're accessing it on paper, not online. You can write a shorter note, just kind of abbreviate it to what you need to be there. So here we've got another possible senses concerning, touching upon, and then some citation, a bit about modern editors, which again, too long. But then we've got a very similar note, another possible senses concerning, touching upon, and then our citation, but it cuts off this extra sentence here because this is all that's really needed for the PDF, at least with what the editor thought. And so you just encode that as usual, your note, your type, anything that's in there that needs encoded, such as your quotation marks, which here are encoded as gloss elements, citations using our ref elements, titles using our title elements, and so on. And then for those ones as well, you add a subtype, but this time you're going to use print only. So here it is. So this section would only go online. this section would only go in the PDF. You're not going to see both notes in either place. Okay. And this went by quite quickly. Sorry, folks. But to kind of go over what we just talked about, the first thing we talked about was the standard structure for annotations. So you'll recall that we require that related element or related item element in our TEI header, because that says, hey, we're annotating a different file. Please connect these two files. And then they also need that div type equals annotations inside the body of the text. We've got our note element, which is used for a few different things. The first one is that each annotation needs that parent note type equals annotation element. And that's for the, string of text. Each annotation also needs a label, which is a note type equals label element. And that's going to match what the string of text you're annotating is. Should typically match exactly, unless it's a long string of text, at which point, you'll abbreviate with an ellipsis in there. All of your other note elements do need a type attribute. Your options are gloss, commentary, textual, pedagogical, performance, lexical, and lineation. And then you can make your notes appear either online only or print only. Some annotations are only automatically going to appear in one place. Some are going to automatically appear in both. If your notes are too long, you're going to get error messages in your PDF. You can write abbreviated annotations for those cases if you so choose, and then indicate which note should be online or in the PDF using that subtype attribute. We do have documentation about annotations. These are the 3 pages that we really looked at or talked about today. Types of annotations, write annotations, and encode annotations. I think there are 2 other files maybe, or 2 other pages in that annotation chapter, which is chapter 16, if you want to just go ahead and read through all of it. Some acknowledgements. Thank you to the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada for funding this webinar series. Thanks to me for designing some slides. Thanks to Martin Holmes for TEI customization, and to HCMC at UVic for site design and hosting. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and check if there are any questions. Okay. If not, I suppose I'll say, feel free to go and encode some annotations now. Thank you all for coming.
Can I ask a question about the lexical notes?
Yes.
In some cases with very slang words, I've been putting etymology in my gloss. Is that okay if it's very like it's a slang idiom from the Dutch? I've been putting the derivation in the gloss. Is that appropriate, or should I move it to lexical notes?
I'll leave that to Janelle.
I would move it into the lexical note, right? So think for your gloss, think about what the student reader needs to know. If they probably just need to know that it's a slang term meaning something. But the scholar who's going to want to know more about where that term came from, the lexical note is going to be really valuable.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, with no other questions, I suppose I will set you free for the day and again say thank you for coming. I know it's the end of the year and a very busy time for lots of folks, so we appreciate you showing up this morning.